All right, folks, James Swift of Uncommon Journalism here, of course, with Kit Kat Kristen as always. And you know, when you think about the holiday season, you think about friends, family, eggnog, mistletoe, chestnuts roasting over the fire, so many great things. But
Keep going.
yes, but today we're going to talk about things that, much like that, are quite jarring. We're looking at ho-ho horror movies. These are films which maybe aren't traditionally in the horror genre, but certainly have some elements that kind of lend to some scary and eerie and creepy things, and they all have a very decisive holiday bent. So, Kit Kat, I'll let you have the ground floor here. When you think Christmas and you think creepy and horror, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, as an introduction, the Christmas and holiday tidings arise after Halloween. Pumpkins, skeletons, orange and purple lights transition into reindeer, gingerbread, and red and green lights. And most people consider decking the halls the most wonderful time of the year. On the other hand, the holidays can be very overwhelming and irritating, with buying gifts, visiting Santa Claus, traveling, coping with flu season to the extent where we wish to be reverted back to Halloween. Have some fear and relief, fresh faced friends, because Christmas can be festive and creepy with creativity and classics. That's right. We are about to boo humbug our way throughout the ho ho horror show, critiquing films that have sort of scary holiday happenings. And not to mention, with live events canceling again, this movie list will be the precise way to spend a possible Christmas cabin fever, regardless if you've been naughty or nice.
All right, perfect. And as always, our format here is we go through 10 different movies. We kind of have a ranking system where we kind of cross pollinate our particular tastes and preferences for the movies. But I think for the holiday season, you really can't go wrong with either of these 10 movies. They're all fantastic in their own special way. So we're going to start with a film which I think is kind of sort of indicative of the entire is it a Christmas movie or not a Christmas movie dynamic. Starting off our countdown from 1988, it is Die Hard.
Mm, yes. And this is an action thriller movie. And again, it's at the bottom of the list because unfortunately, I'm not fond of action movies. They just don't have an effect on me like horror and comedy do. And I mean, there's just no fun with the action thriller type movies. I mean, in this movie particularly, terrorists and hostages on Christmas Eve. I mean, to some extent, crime is nonfiction, especially with goes on in our crazy world nowadays. But on a positive note, there are good performances by Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman. To Willis's advantage, it did benefit his acting career as he went on to portray in The Sixth Sense, also Pulp Fiction, Armageddon, etc. So kudos to that. But again, sorry folks, I mean, I'm not saying don't watch Die Hard, but you have to be really into action adventure, sort of gangster type shows.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where it's not really one of my favorite 1980s action movies. You know, I can do, the canon stuff all day, all the Sly Stallone Arnold movies, love those. This one, I don't know, it's a little bit, like you said, a little bit too rooted in reality. Um, but we do have great performance, like you said. We got Severus Snape doing a great job as the villain in this one. And I've always kind of heard people describe this as like the most big budget Hollywood zombie movie of all time. It actually does kind of have the same sort of format template as Dawn of the Dead, except with terrorists invading an LA high rise. So, kind of going back to where you kind of introduced the film, is it a Christmas movie or is it just an action movie set during Christmas?
To my knowledge, I mean, from what I read, I thought it takes place on Christmas Eve in Los Angeles, where he goes to visit his estranged ex-wife. But again, since this is in the lowest ranking, I find myself not elaborating it as much. But I will say this, I give Reginald Vell Johnson a lot of credit as his role. I think you know what I'm about to say, as Sergeant Al Powell in Die Hard, because this was considered a quote warm up. Because later on, he would have to tolerate the dim witted Steve Urkel in Family Matters from 1989 to 1998. And Carl Winslow, the fictional character, he was also a full-time policeman, you know, wife, family, I mean, just had his life all planned. But unfortunately, Urkel got to his nerves continuously. So if anything, he kind of got a break in Die Hard 1 and 2.
You know, it's going to be a controversial statement, but I think the Die Hard movies would be a whole lot better if you subbed out Bruce Willis with Stephen Urkel.
Oh my goodness.
I think it'd just be a better overall franchise. But
Who
yeah, I mean,
knows? Maybe that might turn into a humorous thriller, but I'll take that.
definitely. All right, so Die Hard, we're not exactly the biggest fans of it. We know it has a huge following out there. We're not going to, say anything too bad about it. But I agree with you pretty much. It's one of the lower tier action movies of the 80s. But it's all right. I can watch it, once a year maybe. All right, and that gives us ample opportunities to move on to the next movie on our countdown. A little bit of confusion about this one. Now, are we referring to the 1997 Jack Frost movie or the 1998 Michael Keaton Jack Frost movie?
This is the horror comedy from 1997, which was directed by Michael Cooney. And again, I mean, not a bad movie, but just didn't get into it because when you introduce the serial killer Jack Frost, it goes back to the crime and the action, where he left a trail of 38 bodies across 11 states before he got arrested. This psycho is on the loose again. If anything, Jack Frost is kind of like the Christmas version of Michael Myers, only I think Myers is more malevolent and quicker than Jack Frost. But there are some unique killings in this movie. Icicle and chest. Also, the anti-freeze with oatmeal. That's got to be quite a mess. I mean, again, it's a cheesy 1990s movie, but it did bring a sequel, for Jack Frost 2, which was Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman that came out in 2000. But in this case, rather having the, as I was going to say, rather critiquing Michael Myers from Halloween, this time it's Frosty the Snowman, or should I say Frosty the Slaughter Man, or Killy the Snowman.
I have way too many things to say about the movie, but I'll start with a confession here. I have to get this off my chest because it's been weighing on my consciousness for 20 years now. So I'll bring up the Michael Keaton movie because way back in the day, in the video store era, one of the pranks I pulled was actually switching the 1997 horror Jack Frost video with the 1998 family-friendly Michael Keaton Jack Frost movie. So that means at some point at Blockbuster, there may have been some person who unwittingly rented a horrible family comedy movie about a killer snowman.
Interesting. So you really think that there was some plagiarism in there when creating, or I mean, not so much creating, but when writing the script for this movie?
Well, I think for this movie in particular, actually, the Jack Frost in 1998 was actually supposed to be a Frosty live-action remake, but for some reason, he got the licensing for it, but that's been in developmental hell for years and years. But no, I just wanted to be, just your average rebellious teenager trying to stick it to the man and cause video havoc.
Well, on the other hand, with the Jack Frost from 1997, I did like Shannon Elizabeth because she did become very popular in the late 1990s, early 2000s, especially with the American Pie series and Scary Movie. Um, and again, she was the main character of the movie, so that did bring some good elements to it. But again, with whatever you want to call it, Oatmeal the Snowman, Frosty the Slaughter Killer, whichever. It's again, it's something to watch at your leisure, like I always say.
And I guess probably the most memorable scene in the entire movie, and the one that you kind of have to tiptoe around describing it, is the part with the bathtub. I think it's probably the most iconic. I can see why people would hate the movie just for that scene alone, but I don't see why it might be endearing because of that scene alone. But do you think they maybe went a little bit too far with some of the sight gags in this one?
I was going to say that was I was going to say that was more detailed than the Nightmare on Elm Street bathtub scene, if you know what I'm referring to.
I still can't look at carrots the same way.
For sure.
Yeah, and just one last thing about Jack Frost. Our copy of the movie doesn't actually involve the movie itself. It's the actual old video cover. It had the old lenticular box art, the hologram. So if you walk in front of it, you have like a happy snowman. Then you turn a corner. Oh, now it's freaking out like a skeleton face. And that was a really cool thing from the 90s, late 90s in particular. Sort of a very sort of, point in place sort of ephemera there for me. But yeah, I think it's a guilty pleasure movie. I don't think it's a great horror film by any stretch, but I've seen worse. And Jack Frost 2 is a terrible, terrible movie. That's like shot on video. It has little snowball Muppets. It's just terrible. This one's actually enjoyable, so I'll give it a pass.
There you go.
All right. And speaking of controversial Christmas movies from 1984, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Now, I am a huge, huge fan and apologist to this movie. I will write essays in defense of it, but a lot of people out there really, really hate it. So where do you kind of lay on the sort of dynamic here?
Well, in this case, you're not dashing through the snow, you are slaughtering through the snow. And once you see that decapitation, off with your head. Again, it seems like a fun movie to be a part of. Like, I bet Robert Brian Wilson, who starred as the teenage Billy or the killer Santa Claus, was thrilled to be a part of a Christmas horror show, just as I was overjoyed to be a labyrinth-like character during Halloween. And again, for an underrated movie, it's also very traumatizing and depressing because Billy's parents were murdered, I mean, brutally on Christmas Eve. And then he and his baby brother were brought to an orphanage. And the arrogant mother superior is you know what? I mean, I can't say that over the recording because that would be naughty.
We all know what happens to naughty people.
For sure. Yes. Santa's not bringing toys to naughty girls or boys.
Yeah, there are, once again, just so many things about this movie. I don't really know where to begin. I can say this for people who've never seen it before and just heard about it. I think it's a really hard sell because, like I said, it's a very brutal movie. I mean, when you go into it, I mean, like 10 minutes in, you've got like rape and robberies and really horrific murders up close and detailed. But I also think that unlike a lot of horror films, slasher films in particular from the 1980s, this one actually is a really, really good character study. I mean, 'cause it's not just, a guy, having an accident happen to him and then he goes, wackadoodle and goes out and, strangles teenagers. It actually does kind of go into the psychology of, trauma and how, all these built up things can lead to a sudden, display of violence later on in one's life.
And so, how he presents Christmas and people. I mean, joyful people.
Absolutely. So as a guy who minored in psychology, I can enjoy that element of the movie. And of course, once the mayhem starts, I mean, you got some good gore in this one. You got Linnea Quigley getting killed by reindeer antlers.
Yes. Of course, you got her obscene and explicit scenes. Britt Leach, who was the store manager, I recognized him as Al, Gary's oblivious but disciplined father in Weird Science. So needless to say, that is one element of the movie that I like. But then, of course, I mean, he's drunk and obliviated, even in this movie, and then he gets slaughtered by Santa Claus.
Some guys are just going to get typecast, it seems.
And again, it is another cheesy 1980s horror movie, but I think with more, like with more of a devastating story. And it kind of reminds me, and again, this is going to be a little bit more minor, but it reminds me 2 years ago of when I brought my pampered cat to have pictures with Santa at Petco. Like they were doing free photos with Santa. And unfortunately, Tommy was very overwhelmed at the yapping of the puppies. And then when he sat on Santa's lap, he also, like, he could smell the dogs, even though that they were nowhere in sight. So the caption for this photo is, "I saw Tommy hiss at Santa Claus," because as soon as he was put on Santa's lap, he just turned around and he hissed at him, teeth showing and everything, and then his eyes were glaring. Fortunately, he did not scratch him because, cats are known to do that unexpectedly. But it's one of those things where it was just as hostile and just as naughty as Billy punching Santa
And I
Claus.
guess probably the only other major sticking point from Silent Night, Deadly Night is I absolutely love the Warm Side of the Door Christmas song they play during the Toy Store stocking montage.
Yes, and you know what? I was going to say it's pretty, it's romantic, but it's also mildly creepy. Silent Night, Deadly Night it had a decent soundtrack to it.
Yeah, it's one of my Yuletide favorites. Acquired taste, a guilty pleasure for sure. It spawned, let me see, I think it's five sequels now in a remake.
Yes, I was going to say that it became a franchise. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to go past the first Silent Night, Deadly Night, but obviously, again, for a low-rated B 1980s movie, I was going to say it actually climbed up to fame a little bit, to become a franchise.
Yeah, and I think it's really controversial to say that all the sequels are very shades of terrible. So you haven't missed anything.
I can only imagine.
All right, and moving along, I believe this is the oldest movie on our list, if I'm not mistaken, from 1939, The Wizard of Oz. So you got to explain to me the Christmas tie-in. This one, it's a little abstract, but I think I kind of get it. But I'll let you have the ground floor on this one.
The Wizard of Oz, and this is a phenomenal movie. 80 years later, it came out in 1939. It was directed by Victor Fleming, who also directed Gone with the Wind. And if anything, they are both holiday classics. A couple days ago, I recently watched The Wizard of Oz for maybe the 200th time. I kind of lost count. And it just occurred to me that it is an otherworldly but eerie movie. It's not your typical over the rainbow land. I mean, there are creepy moments where you got Oz's head appearing, the witch's castle, the haunted forest to the witch's castle. I mean, would you have gone with your instincts and turned back? You think you would have listened to directions?
Not on that gold brick road, that's for sure.
Who knows? Also, the poison poppies. So much for running and burning off calories in that perspective. Since this is, I was gonna, like you said, since this is the oldest movie, I'm gonna have some trivial fun. I'm gonna ask a couple questions, because there's a lot to it. The first one is, who was originally cast the role of the Tin Man before he had an allergic reaction to the makeup?
Oh, it's got to be Buddy Ibsen.
You got it. The second question, which US president was mentioned in If I Only Had a Brain?
Okay. So it came out in 1939. The book was written in 1900. Was it McKinley?
Lincoln. With the
Wow.
thoughts you'll be thinking you can be another Lincoln if you only had a brain. True or false? The Wicked Witch of the West was cut in some scenes due to children's horrifying reactions.
Okay, I'm like 35 and I'm still terrified by her, so that's got to be true.
It is definitely true. And then the last one, here's a multiple choice question. Why did Miss Gulch want to take Toto away? A, Dorothy bit her, per Uncle Henry. B, Toto bit one of Miss Gulch's legs and got the sheriff to give her an order for it. C, Dorothy literally bit Miss Gulch as she threatened to do. Or D, all of the above.
Even if it's not true, I'm going to go with all of the above.
Well, in reality, it's B, but in some way, in some extent, it is all of the above because that was, if anything, that's what started the movie, if you know what I mean. Like it's just, she took away the dog, she ran away, the twister came, she hit her head, and then she was taken to, the Munchkin Land and then Emerald City, the Witch's Castle, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Dorothy and her friends, they were mainly rewarded for their wishes as opposed to being granted. They just didn't realize it. I mean, think about it. The Cowardly Lion was ostentatious. The Tin Man was very sentimental. The Scarecrow was the thoughtful ringleader. And Dorothy, of course, was seeking adventure, but she was still homesick.
How many levels of terror do we have in this movie? We've got tornadoes, we've got witches, we've got flying monkeys, we've got people melting. Like, I think this may actually be the first like full body meltdown in a movie anywhere is in The Wizard of Oz. We got the scarecrow being dismembered. I mean, there's a lot
Yes,
of
I was going to say because it's that's by the flying monkeys, right? I mean,
it,
that's just like the Tin Man said. I mean, that's you everywhere because they they really took them apart. Yes, and The Wizard of Oz has become a very good influence. Hey, where did I start off with uncommon journalism? I took advice from the Good Witch of the North, where it's always best to start at the beginning, and that's where you follow the yellow brick road. But during my journey, I promised that I wouldn't pick any apples off talking trees because that slap on the hand must have hurt.
One of the things that I've always really admired about the movie, and this happened like when my eighth grade civics course, we talked about like the underlying, like socio-political sort of roots of the book. That apparently it's actually sort of like a metaphor for like monetary policy of the late 1800s. Kind of hard to imagine that would be the stimulus for such a beloved children's movie that's been, a timeless classic for almost a century now.
I mean, it really has. Now, newcomers are always doubtful. So going back to uncommon journalism, either way, I got you, Jazzy James, and your little writing talents too.
That is a
I think I
very short.
watched the movie a little too much.
And who, I forget the name. Was it Margaret? What's her last name? Who
I
played
believe
the
it was Margaret Hamilton who was the Wicked Witch of the West.
What I also vividly recall, she actually reprised her role on Sesame Street many, many, many years later, and into some of the most terrifying things that have been allowed on PBS.
She
So,
did.
kind of guess probably the only other major thing I recall about the movie is, have you heard the urban legend about one of the Munchkins allegedly dying on set?
Yes, I did. And I was going to say that was traumatizing. That kind of reminded me of, how they call it the poltergeist cursed, or like scenes from The Exorcist where Linda Blair, who played the possessed child, saw things, and like even some of the other cast and crew members began to encounter some spiritual like spiritual presences. So yes, I mean that's another creepy moment of the Wizard of Oz, with the Munchkin, and if anything, that's the most scariest element of all in the movie because that's actually nonfiction.
I can't argue against that. All right, and moving along, the movie that has almost single-handedly kept Hot Topic in business since 1998, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay. The Nightmare Before Christmas, actually, correction on that, because The Nightmare Before Christmas was actually released on October 13th of 1993. And I know that that was so long ago, but oh, I can't recall if that was a Friday the 13th in October. Would you remember?
That would have been too perfect if it was.
It was, but either way, what's this? What's this? I'm with you, Jack. This isn't fair. There is fright, but jolly, or there's not fright, but jolly in the air. Children throwing snowballs instead of throwing heads, and they sleep with red candy canes, not pumpkins in their beds. What is this? Christmas trees, mistletoes, elves, whatever did I miss? Oh, Santa Claus. What is this?
If Tim Burton is watching, she is available. Just want you to know.
Yes, I am. And also, Tim Burton, another good tune is Kidnap the Santa Claus and Bring Back Halloween. Hey, I know it's going to return next October, but I'm devastated that it's over because it's an epic holiday. What can I say? Um, but The Nightmare Before Christmas, I had it right in the middle of my list, because this has become an exceptional film for Christmas and Halloween. It truly is an atypical production. I'm not a die-hard fan, but I like it because it empowers both holidays. And in that case, what will Santa bring this year? Well, I mean, hey, look, he's almost headless. Oh, and he makes deathly creaking noises.
That actually may be more terrifying than heads. Like,
I was going to say, who knows? Because those headless dolls were actually kind of pretty.
so yeah, The Night Before Christmas, like you said, it's a very, very sort of novel idea for a movie. I kind of have a hard time believing that movie would get greenlit nowadays. Um, but yeah, I mean, what really more can you say about it? It's one of the most beloved cult classics of the 1990s. You've got some great musical numbers, great character design. And one of the things I really like in the movie is how much of it is sort of a throwback to like the 1930s silent horror era. Like, I mean, there are scenes in this movie that are almost like scene by scene lists from stuff like The Cabin of Dr. Caligari. So it's
Right.
definitely cool for the set pieces alone.
And there's also notable actors in Nightmare Before Christmas, including Catherine O'Hara, Paul Rubens, who we know as Pee Wee Herman, Ken Page, who was a very talented singer. He also had some singing scenes in All Dogs Go to Heaven, as well as Cats. We all know that the story is by Tim Burton. Director is Henry Selick. Chris Sarandon from Fright Night and Child's Play does the speaking voice of Jack Skellington. And as far as the singing voice of Jack Skellington, what do you know? Danny Elfman from Oingo Boingo. How can I not know that from Weird Science?
I mean, you got pretty much everything there. You got Tim Burton, you got Danny Elfman, you got Chris Sarandon. I mean, it's like an all-star lineup here.
It is. I was going to say it's a really. It's not your again, like I was saying. It's a typical gothic movie, but I mean, it's got like it's a typical gothic joyful movie. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where, for me, it's kind of hard for me to not be kind of biased against it because it seemed like every like girl I dated in high school and college was a huge, huge fan of this movie. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to kind of shake that out, between personal life and enjoying it as an objective movie. But I think it's a good movie. I think it's actually kind of underrated a little bit because it has
Right.
sort of cult of following around it. But yeah, it was mid-level for me too.
Yeah, and also my favorite scene, of course, the beginning where they introduce Halloween, fingers like snakes and spiders in my hair.
Still waiting for that sequel where he goes to like St. Patrick's Day land or Columbus Day.
Or Thanksgiving, or wait a minute, don't they at one point almost kidnap the Easter Bunny as opposed to Santa Claus?
They do. That's a plot point. So
Yes.
you never know. Maybe it'll be coming to Disney Plus someday.
Good deal.
All right, and now we're going from A Nightmare Before Christmas to A Night of a Different Kind from 1984. You have to correct me on this one. It is Night of the Comet, starring the amazing, multi-talented Catherine Mary Stewart as the
And,
heroine.
and I knew that you would like this one. Night of the Comet just celebrated its 36th anniversary. It was released in November 16th of 1984. And I knew that you would like this because it's got Catherine Mary Stewart from The Last Starfighter. Also, Kelly Maroney, who we know is the perky cheerleader in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then she was also the main character in Chopping Mall. And this was a hilarious, nostalgic movie, especially the theater, because it just seemed like a fun place to socialize and work. You had popcorn, the Twizzlers, which Regina was munching on, soda, and even just to buy tickets. All of the above was still under $20. And then, of course, the video games that pique your interest. But still, and a significant soundtrack as well. My favorite song was Learn to Love Again, which was by Amy Holland with a duet with Chris Farren. This one really had an effect on me because we need to learn to love again on this earth. We really do. There were other good songs such as Lady in Love by Revolver, Whole World is Celebrating by Chris Farren, and Trouble by Skip Adams, which I also like because it's very energetic and upbeat. But I think the one that really stuck out was Learn to Love Again.
The more I think about it, the more I start to think this might just be the most 80s movie ever made. I mean, it has all of the trappings and the tropes. I mean, it's the general plot line is, you have like, I think it's like a comet sort of based on Halley's Comet back in 86, year I was born. It came along as a big deal. So everybody's watching that, and they get incinerated by, through whatever funky extraterrestrial means happens. So basically, we have a bunch of ragtag survivors, mostly Valley girls, some stock boys, and of course some nefarious government agencies. So you have all these really diverse characters kind of interacting in the wastelands of Southern California. And I realized, watching this movie that I may actually spiritually be a 16-year-old Los Angeles girl because even after the fall of humanity and civilization, what's the first thing you do? You go to the mall and you play Tempest.
Exactly. And yes, since I'm a girl, my favorite scene was the mall scene because girls just want to have fun with the makeup and the fashion and the dancing. But still, with Night of the Comet, can you imagine a Christmas where a comet turned most people into dust or zombies? I mean, look at this. Like, look at the stocking. Okay, nothing comes out. I mean, should we recruit the last starfighter to investigate? Who knows? I mean, they came out the same year and there are sci-fi occurrences.
That is a crossover movie I never knew I wanted until now. Wow. Yeah, I was when you showed me the list, I was kind of for a moment I was like, well, I'm trying to kind of figure out what the Christmas angle is, but we also have the King Appearance by Santa, who shows up in this one as well.
They do. And again, the what there's also the zombies where again, they're creepy, but again, they also just have that, I'm trying to think, that happy-go-lucky 1980s look to them, which I was probably laughing in this movie as opposed to being scared. I mean, and again, I would say that I had it on the low to middle of the list because again, to me, it didn't really strike me as freaky, but funny. But overall, it is a good movie.
Yeah, this is one of those movies I like to show to people who've never heard of it before. I've never shown someone who didn't love it afterwards. It's just so much fun, so kitschy, so kooky. And if you really need a selling point, it's basically Fast Times at Ridgemont High meets I Am Legend. So how can you go wrong with that?
How can you go wrong with that? That is right.
All right, and moving along to the year 2009, we have one of the many, many film adaptations of the classic A Christmas Carol. This is the animated one with Jim Carrey. I know you are a huge, 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 huge admirer of this movie, so let us know what we've been missing.
I was going to say, take it away. Disney's A Christmas Carol that came out in 2009. I mean, amazing performances by Jim Carrey, Colin Firth, Carrie Elways, Gary Oldman, Bob Hoskins. I mean, there are, I was going to say, various, not scenes, but I was going to say, like, there are various, shows based on the Charles Dickens Christmas Eve in 1843. But I really love this version because it's spellbinding, transfixing, bewitching, intriguing, bone chilling. I can go on forever. And it's a 3D computer animated fantasy horror film. And there were numerous debates if children should have been allowed to watch this masterpiece, due to some horrific scenes, which includes the skeleton of the ghost of Christmas present, the dead horse, the buggy, and the driver attacking Scrooge in the future, up close scenes with the ghosts of Christmas future, especially when he says, I am not the man I was, and then the ghost pushes him into the coffin. And my favorite scene is the dark and intense moment of Scrooge's death, because it leaves audiences pondering what year he will die on December 25th. Could it be the following year? Could it be 10 years from now? And hey, as a horror fanatic, that grave scene kind of petrified me.
Yeah, this was, I think, the only movie on the list that I had not seen before until you brought it to my attention. And I was really kind of surprised just how creepy it is. I mean, it is a really, really dark movie for Disney fare. And like you said, especially the ending of where he's like dangling over the grave and literally like being cast into hell in a Disney movie was just really something I didn't expect. And another thing that really makes the movie really, really freaky to me is it has that CGI where it's almost a cartoon, but it's also very, very human looking. So the scientific term we hear is uncanny valley. So you're seeing this thing that's not real, but it looks so real that it kind of conflicts you. And I was just really weirded out, even like in the most like mundane scenes. So I just felt like this weird ugh to it. So yeah, it's definitely a very unnerving movie from like start to finish.
Yes, I mean, even the Jacob Marley was scary, especially when he took off his, I was going to say I'll just say his supporter. I mean, his mouth is just like hanging there. I mean, that would terrify little kids, to be honest.
Yeah, we've got Jim Carrey doing multiple roles throughout the movie. It's sort of a vehicle for him. Great music, great animation. Am I leaving anything out?
No, and also Robin Wright also did one of the voices in that movie, and as well as if forgive me if I'm not saying her name correctly, but is it Finola Flanagan?
That is as close as I can get.
Yes. Okay. You do know who I'm referring to.
So personally, I still prefer A Muppet Christmas Carol, but this one did surprise me. It is a very good movie. You haven't seen it before, so give it a chance.
For sure, because you were right. This was at the top of my list.
Right, and moving along, a movie that has a newfound significance for us after tonight's recording, Gremlins.
Yes, because they seem to have affected our show all night. But even for a 1984 movie, the director was Joe Dante, and the screenplay was not Christopher Columbus, but Chris Columbus. And there are some very strict rules. Number one, do not expose to sunlight, which will kill. Do not let it come in contact with water; it will multiply. And most importantly, don't feed it after midnight. And not even this protein drink right here. No, it is imperative that you follow the rules, or there just might be a gremlin in your bed. And don't confuse these creatures with Ghostbusters. I mean, for those who didn't know, Mogwai is the Cantonese word for monster, evil spirit, demon, vicious, anything in the villainous category.
And what a cast we have in this movie. We got Zach Galligan, we've got Phoebe Cates, we've got so many great character actors in this movie. It's like the 80s all star alignment for a horror movie.
And Howie Mandel provided the voice for Gizmo. Um, what scene that really gets me is, who tied up the dog? I mean, was it the Gremlins or the disreputable Mrs. Deagle?
I think it probably be Miss Deagle, but I want to leave the fandom open. It's very open to
Okay.
interpretation.
Okay, yes, that always had me a bit perplexed. But if I were Mrs. Deagle, and I was asked, "How did you spend your Christmas?" Well, I was launched out of the house on a stair lift and sabotaged by gremlins. And another creepy moment, like right in the beginning to the middle, where it's, "Do you hear what I hear?" on the record player. Well, the answer is, I hear gremlins loosely invading my kitchen. And then they get microwaved, processed, and stabbed. Another, I was going to say, memorable scene is the bar scene, where I sure hope that Phoebe Cates' character, Kate, got overtime for the diligent work, because those gremlins made a mess of the beer, card game, popcorn, blasting the radio, dancing. Did I leave anything out?
Well, I think the only major one would probably be the department store grand finale, where Spike gets, or Stripe, I believe is his name, gets
Stripe.
the.
Right. And the gremlins watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Stripe didn't die in the explosion. He just went to get more candy across the street. I'm analyzing this as if he were human. Now that is scary.
Yeah, there are so many things going on in this movie. Like, one thing I didn't know, I want to get this though. I didn't know, is this the same Chris Columbus who went on to direct Home Alone, who wrote the movie, or is it a different guy?
Let me double check that. I'm
Because
pretty sure.
that,
I'm pretty sure that's it. Yes,
that was,
it is the same Chris Columbus.
well, I did not know that. That is, wow. That guy has some range. And of course, Joe Dante, he's the guy who did The Howling. He later went on to do a lot of other movies. Small Soldiers, Matinee, a great John Goodman movie from 1992. And going back to the rules, because everybody knows the rules of the Grimm's. If you haven't actually seen the movie, you know how the things work out. And doing my research for the movie, did you know there are people out there who have written like 80-page dissertations on how the midnight rule works across different time zones?
Yes, because now in the movie, were they supposedly out in California?
I believe so. I could be wrong. Yeah, I can't give you a confirmation one or the other, but there are people who have like written like these long, long like college level essays about, how metabolism works according to like the gravitational pull and position of the sun. So
Right.
people out there have way too much free time, but they love gremlins, so you can't say anything bad about them.
They do, but still, I think when they started debating on Eastern and Pacific and Mountain time zone, I mean, like, I'm sure that that got a little controversial.
And then speaking of controversial, this is also a movie that's kind of notorious for actually instigating the PG-13 rating in Hollywood.
The,
Yeah, apparently a lot of people went to go see it, took their kids to it, and what they weren't really a big fan of, all the exploding microwave scenes and the jokes about people being killed in chimneys. So this and Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom were actually the two big catalysts for the entirely new rating system. So it has a place in movie history there too.
and I did read about that, and I mean, in some ways, they do have some violent moments, especially for a 1984 movie.
Yeah, I know we're kind of stepping a little bit outside the Christmas theme here, but do you prefer this one or Gremlins 2?
Definitely this one.
I'm going to slightly tilt towards Gremlins 2. It's a little bit more tongue in cheek, but this one is definitely a good horror movie. Certainly better than most, I'm going to say like 90% of the Christmas themed horror movies out there. Like Elves. Did you ever see that one?
Oh, long time ago.
Oh, what a terrific movie. And so many rip-offs of Gremlins come after this. You had Ghoulies and Munchies and all sorts of movies about little creatures causing havoc. So it's the original and it's still the best. That's
Yes, it
hardly.
is.
All right, and now we come to a movie. Do we call it a TV movie or a regular movie? How would you prefer it?
Well, if you're referring to the remarkable Rankin-Bass production of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that came out in 1964, then I would say let's do this as a TV movie.
I spoke with you very briefly about this in an email that this is like one of the greatest three-act stories ever written. When I'm, talking to people about writing feature stories or people tell me about, making, nonfiction, whatever, because I'm a pro writer and always ask me for advice on things. One of the things people seem to miss out on is all stories that are really good are all stories of becoming, which is the character in the first act starts off as something, act two, some complications arise and change his or her behavior. And then by act three, they're an entirely different person with an entirely different worldview and sort of intent on life. And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is one of the best sort of, examples of how to properly do a three-act story that I've seen in any kind of media. So just from a narrative standpoint, it's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant movie, outside of the Christmas dressings.
So that's what you meant. Like when I first introduced Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer to this show, you had mentioned that there is a three-way narrative. So that's what you mean. And you know what? To some unique extent, there is, because you got Sam the Snowman, Rudolph, of course, and then the Misfit Toys. I love it, but again, it's not at the top of my list due to some tearful scenes because some of the characters, especially the Misfits, I mean, they felt hopeless. But I mean, hey, I mean, we're a couple of misfits from Uncommon Journalism. We are different from the rest, and that's where we fit in. So don't laugh and call us names. Put 'em on, put 'em on. Oh, wait, we already did the Wizard of Oz.
Yes, I guess I am sort of like the human equivalent of a water gun that shoots jelly, now that you think about it.
Oh my God, a spotted elephant, a choo-choo with square wheels.
Now, the one thing, and I've watched this movie like every year for like 30 years, why is the doll a misfit? Like, what is the design flaw there?
And everyone has various perspectives about the doll. I want to say she is a misfit because her hair is not quite braided. I mean, it just sticks out like Pippi Longstocking, and she doesn't have a name.
That is really, really subtle. There's got to be like some sort of like really deep implicit meaning here that we have to kind of delve into to find out the hidden meaning of the doll of Misfit Islands.
For sure. And I mean, with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I mean, holidays dissolve, then reappear during a specific time of the year. Decent decades are gone, but not forgotten. But this memorable Christmas classic is known like all year and definitely went down in history.
And of course, this being the Ho Ho Horror podcast, I can't tell you how many people I've met and spoke to who were really utterly terrified of the Bomble as a child. Like, there's just something that's so primitive about that character that just instills fear in people.
Yes, I mean, the alarming, abominable snow monster. Yes, he's scary. He's huge. He's got the sharp teeth. He's a Christmas version of the monster in Toby Hooper's The Funhouse. And as Sam the Snowman described him, he's mean, he's nasty, and he hates everything to do with Christmas. Oh my gosh, I mean, who was worse, him or Ebenezer Scrooge?
Well, at least the Bomble bounces. He has that going for him.
Yes, I was going to say. And also, the Bomble did have one weakness, and that's where he couldn't swim. But in the end, as you could see, he was tall enough to put a star on the tree.
And I can't say enough good things about Rudolph. I'm gonna go home and watch it tonight. This got me so peaked up into it. All right, and that leaves us with just one more movie on our countdown here. And I think, in the pantheon of holiday movies, not just the kind of horror adjacent horror, Halloween and holiday movies, this one is just up there with, White Christmas. It's up there with A Miracle on 34th Street, up there with A Christmas Story. It is, of course, from 1990, Chris Columbus's Home Alone.
Yes, and as you pointed out, Home Alone just recently celebrated its 30-year reunion. Came out November 16th of 1990. Now, why am I not surprised that this is another John Hughes production? Because Home Alone aligns with his other witty work, such as The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 16 Candles, and most importantly, The Enthralling Weird Science. Now, Home Alone 1 is uncanny, while Home Alone 2 is hilarious. I mean, there are creepy moments in the first Home Alone where the heater in the basement calls Kevin's name. Old Man Marley, who was not so scandalous after all, but at first was taken aback when he was accused of salting bodies into mummies. The tarantula on Marv's face, and then also snakes in Angels with Filthy Souls, because he sounded and acted like a snake, slithering in the house begging for money.
So one of the things that I'm seeing a lot more in just the internet chatter about the movie is that it's actually like one of the best examples of a home invasion horror movie ever made. Like even before they became really in vogue. And when you really think about it, there's not that much of a difference between this movie and something like Halloween or even Scream, where you have someone, in their domicile and they're invaded and they have to put up with these really nefarious people. So it actually really is like textually a horror movie.
Right. Now, what were your two favorite schemes for the burglars?
My two favorite schemes. Oh, well, it kind of boils down. Do you prefer them being the sticky bandits or the water bandits? Because the sticky bandits are going to get my vote every time.
Okay, well, the Sticky Bandits, that took place in Home Alone 2, Lost to New York. The first one was the Wet Bandits. But in the first one, the two favorite schemes that I liked were the paint cans and the blowtorch door booby trap, because they deserved it, the filthy animals.
I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with, from the first one, I really like the Shovel Killer's Redemption, where he just goes in there and makes a save for Kevin and, Marv and Lloyd, he hit Shovel.
Yes. And then this was also after his face got smashed with an iron as well, because I like the makeup effects on that one too.
Okay, I got the nail gun's a pretty good gag too. Can't leave that one out. There's a lot of good stuff in this one. The only one I don't like though is the one with the ornaments because I don't know if you've ever done this before, but I have stepped on some, shattered Christmas ornaments before. Not a fun experience.
Yes, I have, and that is agonizing. I mean, that is just a flat out ouch.
All right, so have you seen the internet conspiracy theories about how Kevin actually grew up to become the guy in Saw?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, do you want to give that any credence? Could you see it, or is that going to be your head canon?
I would say it's more of the side headcanon, as you said. But on the other hand, I would like to honor the deceased actors from Home Alone because there were quite a few. There was John Hurd, who was Peter McAllister, Kevin's father, John Candy, Gus Polinski. He offers Kevin's mother a lift home when there were no available flights. Roberts Blossom, who played Old Man Marley, and of course, Ralph Foodie, who was the stereotypical 1930s mobster. And although they were not the main characters, I mean, their contributions brought Home Alone to popular standings then and today, and may they continue to rest in peace as we reminisce their ambitious work. And, of course, a message to Santa Claus this year: I just want normalcy back.
People are going to be watching the movie for years and years and years. It's an undisputed classic. This is going to go down in the same sort of league as The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, in my estimate. So it's a holiday classic. It's a movie classic. So if you haven't seen it for whatever reason, go see it. We'll pay the tab for you. It's a great one.
Right. And also it'll go down in history just like Rudolph.
All right. Well, it looks like that's pretty much the end of our list here, but it is the holiday season. Just any final words you want to give out to our listeners, viewers, audience out there about Thanksgiving and Christmas,
In
Festivus?
in conclusion, there are strenuous activities with Christmas, whether attempting to escape the abominable snow monster, self-defensing the notorious burglars, or bravely touring the town with three creepy ghosts. These are accurate ways to mix and mingle with the jingling dare, because that's the Jingle Bell Scare. Hear thy fresh faces exclaim as we record out of sight. Scary and merry holidays to all, and to all a good night.
And go out on a better note than that. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. This is Jazzy James. Kit Kat Kristen, we'll be seeing you in 2021, and we'll be seeing you often. See you
Merry
around.
Christmas and Happy New Year.